Rolling?
Rolling.
Okay, this session on the video, hopefully we're going to show you how to do the two different trimming techniques for an immediate denture, the Jerbi's and the reference line technique. Y'all should have, this is a different articulator than y'all have, but it should be mounted with your bite registrations you all did back in 2010. And so you should have that ready to go. And today we're mainly going to be removing the upper teeth and doing one side reference line, the other side with the Jerbi's technique. And we'll do the Jerbi's on the patient's right and the reference line on the left. I think that's what we have in the PowerPoint. It's going to be an immediate denture, meaning that the patient has teeth when you made impressions and everything. And the patient will have teeth until you extract them, and at that extraction you're going to deliver the dentures. So we need to make the dentures ahead of time. Now we want to guesstimate as what the ridge is going to be like at the time of extraction. And that's why we're going to, you can kind of see when you select teeth how, you know, these centrals are about the same width. The laterals I find are not quite the same. On this side it doesn't look bad. Over here the lateral to me looks skinnier than the one on the cast. Now to trim, to do the Jerbi's technique, we talked about the rule of thirds that we're going to do, that we're going to start off right at the crevice line, then divide this into thirds and sort of follow the contour. If I can do it where I'm doing it for the camera, you can actually see the bottom of the vestibule and then in between. Well, that might not be exactly in the thirds. Here actually I'm a little bit more than a third, and that would be true if you had a patient with deep pockets and a lot of bone loss. On the lingual, you'll just basically outline the gingival roll that's there. And a real person will usually have a little bit better one than that. Now the reference line technique, you basically do just the gingival roll, and then you'll do reference lines on it, as they call it. And let's see, I've got a ruler here, where you would go down the long axis of the tooth and draw a line that help you line the tooth up once it's been cut off. Now Jerbi's, you'll cut off all three teeth and reset them. The reference line, you will set a tooth for each one you take off. So you have that. We use a Bola gauge, or you can even use your little ruler. And in this case, we showed from the incisal ledge down, we use the 16 as our setting. 16 is not a magic number. It depends on your patient, how this would fit in. Like here, if it won't fit well, then I could have done 13, say, or something like that. But we want it down to where that line is still done once you trim the tooth off. You notice we're not doing that on the Jerbi's side. And so we're going to have to rely more on lining the teeth up right. You can actually draw a line on here to indicate where the incisal ledge is. Kind of like in the introductory course, you had your wax rim to guide you where the incisal edge is. Here, when you close it, you can see where that is, and you can even draw it on, let's say, this tooth over here, where that lateral is going to be and where the cuspid is going to be, like that. These are pretty idealistic setup.
Yeah.
And a lot of times with immediates, you're not going to get that. They have periodontal disease or whatever, so they might not want the teeth in the same position. So Jerbi's, you take them all off and you can set them up in more ideal positions. Reference line, you can put them back in the same position. I used to encourage my patients to try to keep some of their character, meaning have some of the little twists and gaps or whatever in their teeth to make them look natural. With cutting these teeth off is first to cut my midline. Now you've got to be careful with this. I recommend you use a die saw like this. And you do the saw where the teeth aim backwards, so it cuts on the pull instead of the push. But don't just cut down the middle, because we're going to take off the right central incisor, lateral, and cuspid, But we don't want to remove any stone from the left central, or we're going to move our midline to the left, okay? So I like to come on there and actually put my thumbnail right on it, and you pull it. And it didn't take much to get through there, but now I've made one cut. Now I'll go to the others, because we're going to do them all at once.
Pretty much cutting the interproximals, right?
Yep, just separating the two teeth from each other, okay?
And you should have that saw in your kit.
Yeah, it should have been there for your crown and bridge class, I assume.
Yes.
It's great to, grab that tooth and just, break it off.
Or you can get a pair of tweezers, or you can get any
pliers almost. In fact, I have my little pocket knife that a lot of people see me use that is kind of a neat little gadget. It has pliers built into it. And it can even work, so. Okay. So then once you have that, as you can see, it's a little uneven, like somebody got in a car wreck and broke their teeth off.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty. Then to me, I'd go in and just smooth some of that off. You can use a knife. I've got this little green handle buffalo knife, but your brown handle one, if you keep them nice and sharp. We want to now, we've got our extraction site here, and you can see where it was. Now here you've got a root that's going down in there. And when the tooth is extracted, you're going to have a socket, and the soft tissue is going to fall into the socket. The more bone loss you have, the more it's going to roll into there. So one of the first things they want us to do, that we recommend is done, is to actually indent that area about a millimeter. Now to me, this is where you get carried away. If you do too much, you're going to end up taking off too much stone. And if you take too much stone, your denture is going to be thicker. And then when you actually extract the teeth, or have somebody extract them for you, then the denture can't seat all the way. So then we're going to have, and again, I'm going to now mark the inside of the indentation that I have here. And then about halfway across here. Then we're going to want to cut across from the front of it to the upper 2/3 line.
So what you're trying to do here is trying to compensate a little bit of the shrinkage of the tissue?
And from the halfway line, but just the idea of how you're going to move with this. Use the PowerPoint for your steps. See, right now I'm removing the free gingival margin on the lingual, and then we want to kind of round it off till we go down to the next 1/3. But we ought to be able to see those two lines. But it's what we're basically doing, is trying to round that off. But notice the interproximal area is still a little high. So we're not flattening it out. It's still going to have a little washboard effect to it. And that's basically, like I said, go by the PowerPoint on that, because it'll be easier for you to follow. Now we're going to start setting these teeth for the Jerbi's technique. And now one thing I think you really want to do before you start is figure out where your midline is so you don't lose it. And then I like to put sticky wax and actually set the teeth almost with the sticky wax instead of putting a big wax rim on there like you did for the, your conventional dentures in the introductory class. No, they got to use their teeth from the practical.
Okay. So you have to bring their old teeth from the practical.
Yeah, they'll be set up on your wax rim that you did in the last 2 setting practical for the introductory course. Off of here, try to set it. Now on the PowerPoint, it shows this tooth not fitting well, so you had to trim it underneath. I don't think this is going to be a problem. Now it might be more on the reference line, but you don't take as much stone away when you do the reference line technique.
And see how he's doing it all with sticky wax, right, Wally?
Right now I do, because I want to be able to look at the tooth I have set, its relationship to the ridge, before I put wax on it and festoon it to make it look good.
So the sticky wax would work as to fix it very stable, and then at the end you would put a little bit more of that
Of the base plate wax.
base plate.
With this ruler that's got the curved tip on it, and I can put it in position, and you can see I'm a little too far facial with the tooth. So I need to bring it back, and I can look in relationship to this tooth
Exactly.
and see that it's too far out. The neck is about right, so it needs to tip back a little bit. But when I tip it back, it's going to make the incisal edge, I bet, too long, so I might have to go underneath and trim it a little bit. Let's see what it does. And this Avoclair tooth has a little more curve on the facial than the mannequin. And to me, that's part of selecting the tooth. The incisal edge is about even, but it's just a little bit long. Now, I don't mind leaving it a tad long because I can always trim it. Once you deliver it, the patient feels it just a little long, then you can trim it back. But you can kind of see its relationship denture later. I'm putting this back on so I can see the incisal edge relationship to my wax round. Remember how I drew that line there to where this incisal edge should be about even to there.
Let me get on this
So
side.
it's very, and like I said, if it ends up a tad bit long, I almost prefer that.
Yeah.
Because you can take a tad off. If you end up a tad short, it's hard to make it grow. So, right. Now you can see here, now to me that cusp is still too long, but you can see what the patient was. You see here when I put it back on the articulator, it is a little long. So I'm going to go underneath, remove a little bit of the tooth structure of the denture tooth. A lot of times you're going to have to trim underneath a little bit. Now you just don't whack it off because you have to consider how that tooth is sitting on the cast. Remember, it's going to be like so, where the cervical is touching. Just trim it this way. Hollow grind it, so to speak. So you can just take that little bit off, and you can kind of put it on, just holding it with your fingers and see, is that going to be better? And I think that's more in the ballpark of what we're going to want to see. You got to look about your wrapping around the corner a little bit with it. And you can kind of look with this and see, am I staying on that curve? Pretty close. Okay.
Getting close.
Just rounding the corner. Okay, here. Yeah, I'm gonna go with that. It's a tad longer. I think it'll do.
It resolves.
Okay, now here we'll go back to do the reference line technique. We'll go back to our trusty saw. We've already done the midline, and that's why when we set this right central, we didn't move the midline.
Extraction.
So here we're going to do a tooth at a time. We're going to cut that off, and then I want to trim just a little of it, just off that free gingival margin, basically. So you're not taking as much stone off. So the denture will actually have more space under it when you deliver, because we haven't removed as much stone from that surface. Now when I take my left central, try it in there, is it going to fit in that spot? This one does fine. It's a little longer than the right central, just a touch. That's because we haven't taken as much stone away. Don't take more stone away, just go on and, like we did before, take some off underneath. It's not going to need much because it's not that much difference. But this time I do try to get that even.
There you go.
You get about the same length there. Then you can look at the facial,
It's blending.
how they're blending in that area. Take them off one at a time here. Take our lateral off. Now to me, I'd say, well, let me take the cuspid too, but doing it a tooth at a time, I'm putting them back in the same position. Plus, you have this reference line here. I can see that the tooth isn't tilting mesial or distally, it's lining up with that. And we also had a mark here for the midline. We also had a mark here on the lingual for the midline through there, so I can see that actually on the cast. Just like we did before for the central, we take a little bit of it away, the stone, and let's get the lateral, see how it sits in there. Then I'll add some back on the lingual side. Now this one I think is coming out a little long. And see, that way we can come back here, the volar gauge, and measure and say, well, I'm looking at it, it seems a little long, but this is saying it isn't. So we can leave it like that.
Yeah. I find the reference line and taking the tooth one by one a little bit easier, and it's easier not to get lost if you're trying to kind of like copy the same outline.
Now here, I can come back if I'm questioning the length, and I can see it's right at the 16 mark. But look how you have the reference line saying the long axis of the tooth ought to be like this, but it's like this. So see, I need to get the neck more distalized on it. And you can see these others, they're about right on that reference line.
But you see how that 16 measurement, it's just an average. I mean, it's not a measurement that you really need to follow. You just need to find an arbitrary reference line that you would use for all three of them, right?
Right.
That goes from incisal edge to some point in the buccal portion.
Some out there that you're not going to remove when you're trimming the cast. Cool enough. This looks like this.
Go.
And we can see how it looks like on our mounting. And we can close it like that.
I got it right there.
Okay. I'll do a real quick little festooning out on the facial hair. When we're having y'all do this, you don't have to be too fancy, but you don't need it real thick. Particularly if you were very stingy with how much stone you remove. It's not going to need to be real thick. Cut a little bit of this out of the way. Here. Going these interproximals. Roach carver. I'll go around and remove it from that facial of the tooth. Oops. Knew that was going to happen.
The rest of the setup, because the patient is edentulous in the posterior, you would just do it as if any other denture,
before,
right?
Exactly.
We're not doing it this time because of because we have a lack of time.
Gave you all that day off
Yes.
to start Christmas early. Hopefully nobody ran out and partied in the French Quarter and got COVID or anything. A lot of times with an immediate you might find it comes out a little gummier than you would like. If I had my flaming torch here, I would be able to heat up the wax a little bit better, like this side, and take it down more. And a lot of times, the lab tech, when they would actually process the case, were concerned because right at the neck of the tooth, you could see through the acrylic very easily because it was so thin. And I used to warn my patient that after the surgery, they get in front of a mirror and smile. Don't be surprised if your gums right at the teeth are purple. That's the blood showing through because it was so thin. But as we reline and the bleeding stops, that'll go away. You put Cosoft down there, like you've already done a Cosoft lining on the mannequin. You would do that. That's pink. If you use the tissue conditioner, the Co-Comfort, it's white and it makes it look blanched. But you warn the patient whenever you do that. That's temporary. Very soon, that won't be a problem. Just a little more and I can get this lateral and cuspid to look a little better. Swoop it down to that CEJ. Gingivals are a lot more normal. Now, I've had patients where I say, look, they had a lot of recession, and I says, you're going to be obviously different looking if your teeth have no recession. And I'd talk them into letting me trim the gums back so they actually look like they had a receding gum line. I said, don't want you to necessarily look diseased, but I want you to look like yourself because that's the way you are. And I want you, after the surgery, nobody's going to guess that you've had dentures at that point.
That's it.
That's not a real good job, but just enough to show you how you would end up doing it. Of course, you do it on the lingual too.